All right, well, my next guest is a seasoned business coach, author, and professional speaker who helps frustrated employees in corporate jobs break out and start their own business. Her book, Escape from Cubicle Nation, From Corporate Prisoner to Thriving Entrepreneur, was released last year, and she is frequently quoted as an expert on entrepreneurship in the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, Business Week, and Forbes. Her name is Pamela Slim. Pam, thanks for taking the time to join me on Follow the Money Weekly.
I am delighted to be here.
Pam, you have an interesting story. You left your job as a corporate manager, you started your own business, you became your own boss. In your book, you discuss these early years as kind of a detox from corporate life. Share with our audience what that personal journey from corporate prisoner to thriving entrepreneur was like.
Yes, well, I quit my last real job, as we call them, in 1996. I've been self-employed for 14 years. And in my own case, I was really more looking for new challenge and adventure. I actually was not a totally disgruntled employee, despite the name of my book. Some people think I hate all corporate life. I actually really enjoyed it. But I was looking for something new and different. And I quit my job with no plan, which is, of course, contrary to advice now in retrospect. But at the time that I quit in 1996 in the San Francisco Bay Area, it was a very rapid time of growth. For those of you who remember, a lot of technology companies were really going through rapid change. And so I was looking for jobs in the market and not finding anything that sounded really interesting. And so I began consulting for my former boss, who had then moved on to Hewlett-Packard. And when I started to work independently, doing the kind of work that I had really, really loved to do in corporations, except feeling the freedom and flexibility to do it on my own terms and also to work for a number of different companies, I realized that it was the perfect work configuration for me. So I started, as I said, 1996. For about 10 years, I consulted inside all kinds of different corporations across the U.S. and Europe. And it was actually toward the end of that 10-year experience that I began to see major systemic discontent. There were some things that were happening due to economic shifts, due to increased workload, a lot more expectations for employees to always be on and plugged in, that caused a sector of the corporate employees to really feel like they wanted to get out, but they just didn't know how. And I had hundreds of conversations over the years with such people, which led me to start the idea for creating what first was a blog, which is Escape from Cubicle Nation, that later turned into a book. So about the last 5 years, I've focused on that new direction. I left corporate consulting behind, and I primarily focused on working with new entrepreneurs or early stage entrepreneurs to start or grow their business.
Pam, what I like about your story is that it ties right into one of the major themes of Follow the Money's financial education, and that is to help people become less dependent upon one stream of income and instead to learn how to develop multiple streams of income. Many of our listeners have 9-to-5 jobs and feel that running their own successful business is next to impossible. What would you say to someone who's currently perhaps a full-time corporate employee but is wanting to make the leap to become a small business owner? And by the way, how do you plan for a new business while you're still working full-time as an employee?
Well, if any of you remember Inch by Inch, Row by Row, How to Make Your Garden Grow, nursery rhyme song from your youth, that is the approach for people who are in corporate jobs who are wanting to start a business. I have some pretty strong opinions, actually, about how we really all need to be thinking very, very differently about the world of work. Through the economic destruction that we saw in 2008 and 2009, one of the things that's become very, very apparent that I've seen starting as a trend as early as the mid-90s is that no work configuration is secure. In the early days of going on my own, a lot of people said, how could you take that risk to work for yourself? Risk is inherent in any kind of work configuration, whether you're an employee or you work for yourself. So in order to be fully employable, in order to take care of your family, in order to be maximizing your talents and gifts, a positive benefit, I think, of the new world of work is that we all need to be considering that we are self-employed. It doesn't matter where you get your paycheck. You really need to be thinking as an entrepreneur in how you're really driving value, even in your job as an employee, and how could you actually create value and charge for it on the outside. So what I suggest for people that have full-time jobs and often have families. I'm a mother. I have 2 kids, a 5-year-old and a 3-year-old, so I totally know what it's like to make sure that you have time to attend to your family and your work, and often there's not a lot of extra time that's left over. But you need to start somewhere and begin to work on a small little thing. I affectionately call it a side hustle, where you could have a particular idea and you can begin to work piece by piece, day by day or week by week on a little part of that kind of a project. So what I mean as a concrete example is, let's say you have expertise within marketing or communications and you were thinking of maybe taking on some kind of an individual consulting gig. You could do something as simple as creating a very, very basic site with a general page that describes your services. You might try to get one client, and of course checking to make sure it's not in conflict with your employment agreement with your employer. But if you're allowed to do work that's not in direct conflict with them, start really small and see if you can begin to get things going so that you get a sense of what are all the things that you need to put in place in order to be charging, from the outside, get your banking situation really clear, make sure that all of the legal and financial areas are cleaned up, but where you can start to do a little project and just understand what it feels like to be working for yourself, even just a little bit on the side as a freelancer. By doing this, breaking things down into really small pieces and not overextending yourself, you're going to gain momentum over time. And when you accomplish one of the smaller steps, like getting one client, then you can begin to look up, plan for the next quarter about what are some of the other goals that you have. And that is how people that are successful in this make progress, is by breaking something big down into little tiny steps.
I like what you say in your book, that hating your job intensely is not a business plan, because many people, if that was the case, everybody would have one. But what about the very first step in deciding to start your own business? What would you say the very first step would be?
The first step actually has more to do with your life rather than your business. And the first step that I suggest is that you really look at the overall design of your life. What do you want it to be like? Where do you want to live? What are your income needs? What kind of relationships do you want to have with your family, with your extended community, with your kids? And really create a picture of what an ideal life would look like. That becomes the blueprint for how then you sort through and decide the kind of business that you want to start. Most people start by what I call chasing the market. You just say, what's the way to make money? What's a good industry to be in? And you can chase something and even create a supposedly successful business, but what if that business requires you to be on your computer for 18 hours a day, ignoring your kids? Or what if it means you have to be on an airplane all the time? That is not going to give you the quality of life that you're often looking for, which many people are trying to escape in their corporate jobs. So design the picture of your ideal life first. From there, you can sort through business ideas that are directly related to deep passions that you have, problems that you want to solve, things that you're inherently interested in that also have a deep need in the market for you to develop a product or a service around them. And then those are the things that you begin to mold into a specific business model and business plan and all of those things.
It's interesting that you bring that up. With my own businesses, I found that reinventing the wheel is not required, but rethinking the way you view life is. For example, for me, running my businesses is all about having mobility or global mobility. I don't want to start a business that ties me down to simply one location. Of course, when I was working for someone else, that was impossible. Talk about some of the shifts in thinking that are required once someone actually begins to make the leap into becoming an entrepreneur. What are some of the shifts that occur in one's mind? I know it's been a great series of boot camps for me since the time I began my businesses several years ago. It's just constantly a learning process. Talk about some of the things that happen in your mind and shifts in thinking.
Yes. Well, one of the first things is getting used to a very, very different framework for time to deployment and execution. When you're in a corporate setting, those of you who will know this very well, it often takes a long time in order to get one initiative up and running. So if you're wanting to get a new website up and running or a new program or a new product, there are all kinds of steps that you need to go through: approvals, committee meetings, legal review, website design review, and something that you could theoretically put together in about a week may take a few months to get done in a corporate setting, in some cases even years. So when you're used to being in that environment, and often being very, very aware that you need to be checking in with everybody to make sure everybody totally approves and there are zero defects, when you release something, that can really get in your way when you're starting your own business. I do not advocate at all being sloppy or being careless or just slapping something together, but you will not survive if you wait to create a prototype or launch something in your business until it's totally perfect. And in fact, if given only your own devices, you're probably going to spend much too much time trying to perfect something as opposed to getting it out in the market where you can quickly get feedback and make small tweaks and adjustments, which is going to lead you much more toward value and profitability in the market because you're listening to the market. You're not trying to just imagine what you think that your customers will want. So that's one really big thing. It's just getting used to what I call test often and fail fast. Really get small things out there, test it with the market, and make immediate adjustments. The second major mind shift that's really, really critical is to think more like a scientist rather than to have the mindset of success or failure. And what I mean by this is when you're beginning, everything that you have, every idea that you have, every project is a hypothesis. You think that the thing that you're creating is going to be useful. You think that people are going to buy it. You think it's going to be in the right form at the right price. Everything is a hypothesis, and the only way you can find out if that hypothesis is correct is by doing an experiment, by testing it in the market. When you test it, you're going to get certain kinds of results. Either it will confirm what your original hypothesis was or it will refute it. And in my opinion, both of those things are good. You want to get the real facts and the data about what worked and what didn't so that you can make adjustments. What happens if you have a success and failure mindset as opposed to more of a scientific mindset is that, for example, you launch a new product or a program in the market, nobody buys it, and you say, I'm a total failure. I tried it once, I started this business, it totally didn't work, and so I'm just going to go back. And that will not give you the kind of information or data to make adjustments that will allow you to be successful over time. There are tons of failures, if you want to put it in those terms. There are all kinds of ways in which your original hypothesis is refuted by testing it in the marketplace. But if you stop there and don't make the adjustments, you're not going to see the long-term benefits of creating something that's really going to be of value in the end. And there will be some things that you test and try that were just great ideas that really didn't go anywhere, but often by testing them, they lead to other ideas which end up creating something of real value.